Hi everyone, welcome to the Athletic Skills Podcast, and today I've got Brent Dickinson on with me. So Brent is the Head of Academy Performance at Watford. So Brent, thank you very much for joining.
Well, thanks for having me on, Isaac.
So Brent, just want to give a little bit of background on yourself before we dive into a bit more about your role and then some of the work you've been doing at Watford as well.
Yeah, sure. I first started off in rugby league a fair few years back now. So 2005, I started off in the academy, settled down, and was fairly fresh to this team. And went through the academy, implementing the long-term athlete development program, and then joined the first team, I think, about 3 years later, where we had an elite performance group that joined in with the first team, worked alongside them, but still did my role on the evening as the head of academy S&C there. That progressed then into a first team role. I was there till 2013, where I also did my part-time masters at Salford. And then I think it was after the Challenge Cup final 2013, I left and joined Nottingham Forest as the head of academy S&C coach in 2014. So that was my first transition into football. Then stayed within the academy till 2020 in October. And that's when I also started my PhD at Salford part-time as well. Lucky enough to move up to the first team, head of S&C for the club at Nottingham Forest. Was there for 2 years. And then I moved closer to home, back up to Rotherham with my wife. We wanted to start have another child. And then from there, continued on with my PhD, moved on to Port Vale, was head of physical performance back in June this year. And then I got the offer of a chance to come and be the head of academy performance at Watford. So that brings me here from October. It's the whistle stop tour, and it's an enjoyable time at the moment.
And what's your PhD in at the moment?
The comparison of physical characteristics of adolescent soccer players. I've just finished writing that up, so just in the application to defend it. Yeah, it's been enjoyable. I've really enjoyed it. It certainly helped mould and confirm the practice that I do currently. So it was something that I proposed back in 2019 to Paul Comfort, and it was just an idea saying, look, we create so much research through some of the programming and stuff that we did within Forest Academy. And I said, look, can I turn this into a PhD? Because it was just answering so many practical questions to what we were doing. And it went from there. So it developed as PhDs do. And it's really molded and shaped some of certainly my beliefs and philosophies as I move things forward. Certainly now heading up the academy here at Watford. That was the reason why I wanted to take the role on, to implement some of the research that I'd produced, and we'll see it take shape.
And that's one challenge for many practitioners and for yourself who's working within research and practice is actually how you manage to put the research or textbook stuff into actual practice and into context that you're working with. So is that something that you've developed over time, working across various backgrounds in terms of how you actually put maybe gold standard stuff into your context of where you're working?
Yeah. The research is there to help practice. And things certainly back, I remember back to whilst I'd started off Hull, and that's where I was working with Dave Joyce at the point where they really got my first back up for research and actually implementing research-based practice as such. So that's where it started off. And once I got back into the swing of going back into university and trying to really drive how research can affect practice and changing different programs, that initially got me into doing that, going down that avenue again. Then to me, it's so important. But he's getting that fine balance. I think everyone's told research-based practice, evidence-based, but he said there's a fine balance between actually how that can be implemented, what we actually read on a textbook, or actually from papers that we go through day in, day out, week in, week out. He's taking that, and then how can you actually apply that? And does that affect it? Because pretty much a lot of the research we see is in a lab base. So can you actually take that? Can you put that into a team setting? Can you put that into a day-to-day environment where the coach is demanding that they need to do X, Y, and Z? Can it be done? And can you get the gains that research says that you can gain? So to me, that was the biggest thing. Can I create research that is actually linked to practice? And does practice affect the research as well, as such, if that makes sense? It really, fact for me to really find balance and some of the everything that I put forwards within my research, my actual practice now, it has to affect it. If we actually have it, does it affect practice itself? And that's the biggest thing. And that's why I've put together what I have done.
And you mentioned this is now helping you work towards your new role at Watford around creating sort of a culture and sort of physical based program within some of the work you're doing and across the different age groups. So I just wanted to go into kind of your thought process in terms of how you might go around structuring that sort of framework within your setting.
Yeah, I think within younger athletes and adolescent athletes, the change, the develop so quickly and understanding the changes of how they develop. But ultimately, the goal for us is to be able to produce those robust players that can cut it at the elite level, but keep up with the demands of elite level as well. So we have to get that balance right. So can we put in a program that actually develops at each stage, so they can actually cope with the demands of what the first team is, what elite level is. Ultimately, if we can't do that, then we've got a problem as such. So to me, understanding the different aspects of adolescent development, what happens at each stage of development through growth, through maturation, how certain attributes are changed at certain stages of their development as well, and then what you can put in place to affect it. What are the biggest kind of things you can affect as they develop and at each stage as well? And utilizing the information from it, because ultimately we know that it's the intensity of the effort, the intensity of the game at that senior level they have to be able to repeat, certainly a soccer match. So enabling them to be able to do that, but then building the foundation around that as well is key as they go through each stage of development. So we know that they'll be able to cover the same distance, but it's the intensity of what they can actually repeat. That's the biggest thing. So then what also affects that? What strengths elements can we affect? And that for me was the biggest thing going through this, understanding what affects performance the most and how can we develop it.
And how important is creating a culture of throughout different age groups and how that trickles down maybe from the first team and trickles down within to your setting in terms of how the priority of physical development and creating a culture in terms of all the stuff on in within training and out of training.
It's really important to me. It's important. It drives what the ultimately what my bosses want as such. They want a good culture where we produce athletes, we produce players that can actually go up to the first team, sustain the intensity and the level, and be there. But trying to drive a culture of hard work, a group of players that are used to that hard work and that can cope with the intensity of it, and understanding that it's not easy to be a first team footballer, to see the glitz and the glamour of it, but ultimately there's a lot of hard work that goes into it. So if we can start to change that attitude at a younger level, as we start to develop, they understand it more, why they're doing it, and educating them to why they're doing it. Why do we need to get them to live? Why do we need to get them to be fit? So they can cope at different levels of intensity as they progress, as they develop. So we can try and make them as robust as possible. To me, it's important. It's so important. And it's been evident in the programs that I've been lucky enough to work with in the past. And I've seen so much success with that. If you've got a culture that is willing to work hard, a lot of the athletes that have gone through it have succeeded. It's that hard work that will ultimately does overtake. It's an old cliche, but it does overtake the skill and the ability that some people have. They've got the plan and determination to do it. You often see that they're the ones that succeed.
So, what sort of strategies have you gone around in your current work at the moment in terms of creating that culture? Have you had to change much, or have you had a blank piece of paper where you can go and implement what you wanted to do straight away?
Let's understand where the program is. It's been around for a good few years before I've joined the program. It's actually giving an understanding to where the program's at, where the athletes are at, and having a sound kind of testing battery and base so you can understand where your athletes are. They at certain benchmarks that we expect them to be to hit that elite level. How far off it are they? And where's each age group as they're going to progress through it? So for me, it was understanding where they're at, letting the players actually understand where they're at as well. And actually, in some instances, understand where you are to know where you need to go. that makes sense. So actually showing the players, look, this is where you're at. This is what we're trying to change. And this is the reason why. Ultimately, what we do here will affect your out on the field. And once they understand that, and it doesn't change overnight. Once they start to understand that, then you can start to see a change. But the biggest thing for me to help to drive that is you're working with athletes that ultimately elite athletes at this level, even at such young ages. Competition is massive to them. They understand competition. They want to win. So trying to develop that and a little bit of competition in there, to go out on the field, everything's competitive. They should have the same bits within the gym setting as well. Making it competitive in the gym as much as we can gets their interest. As soon as they start to see, okay, this is where I need to be with my benchmarks. This is where I am now. Okay. All right. Let's try and put a program in place that helps you get better. As soon as they start to see the benefits of it and go, oh, hang on a second, I'm getting better. Then it starts to change, and then you can start to see the wheels in motion as such. And that's how we've started to create it. So we've understood where the athletes are. We're through comprehensive testing battery. We've then put a plan in place to deal with deficits that the athletes might have, or try to implement a very basic program to start off with, but one which is going to do the basics really well. And then ultimately challenge them through competition and continually set standards of where we expect them to be. And then ultimately as staff, it's for us to drive those standards. And then you'll get the players on board with that as well. You've got the 18s that are here for 1, potentially 2 years. By the end of that, you know that if they don't get on board with it and they don't progress, then obviously the harsh reality is they don't get the next contract as such. And then obviously you'll start to get the ones that do get on board with it and see the progression, and it just starts to snowball.
So before we go actually into the aspects of your program, I just wonder, you mentioned how a lot of these athletes have got that competitive edge about them, and they'll want to win. So how do you balance in terms of when you're working with academy athletes, thinking about long-term development and that long-term athletic program that you're creating, but also the actual winning now, competitive now? How do you balance those expectations across maybe the players or the parents and the coaches that are working with them in terms of thinking of that bigger picture?
Yeah. So that's why it's important to get each stage right. So right from around the 12s to 14, they have a specific testing battery for them, a fundamental testing battery where they can actually see if they're progressing across the scale. By the time they get to the 14s, the program that we put in place for them is basically about fundamental movement and challenges, and actually building a base foundation of strength for them, body weight control, challenge them in every way that we can. But every testing point that they have, 5 exercises that we believe is for their foundation, so body weight control, and we'll grade them across that as well. So then they get to see that they've got something to strive for. We will keep them progressing across it. By the time they come to the 15s, they know that 15s to 21s, they'll do the same testing battery. Ultimately, they'll have relative benchmarks for them, relative to their body mass, which will then ultimately say, okay, I need to be at this stage by my development. And then the program is put in place around them. We can see the deficits from the testing battery that we've got, and ultimately put a foundation or the program in place for them to know from science and progress. And that'll keep going. So they'll see right from 15 up to 21s. These are the benchmarks where we are. How big is the gap between the age group, and how can we close it? And then how can we do that between each test as well? And it's explained to them from that, even at that young age group, how that relates. And each test that we have relates to output that you see on the field. So the different variables that we look at, we'll explain to them and say, look, these actually relate to distance covered, explosive distance, high speed running, very high speed running. These are the variables that we're looking at. This is if we affect one, it will affect the other, and so on and so forth. So it's made really simple for them to be able to grasp that. And then it's ultimately putting that program in place, ensuring they've got a good foundation of strength, but then also ensuring that once they've mastered that, we then challenge it as well. And then we can see that they're continually progressing against the tests, the benchmarks as such. And ultimately, if they can see where, for example, someone from the 21s that's making it into the first team, where they're at, ultimately where the first team are in their physical benchmarks, if they want to make the first team, which you'd like to think the athletes do, they're like, okay, if I get there, then physically I'll be at that level that player X, Y, or Z is at. So it goes from there.
And you mentioned how there's a lot of discussion with the players in terms of whether that's benchmarks or reasonings why, in terms of you doing something that might transfer to on the pitch. So, what sort of strategies in terms of how you're using around education around this time? Because education will play a key role in terms of their development from a physical point of view.
It's a massive thing. As you go further up the chain, you're less of a salesman because ultimately your first teamers they're already there. Sometimes you have to sell it depending on the people that you've got. However, the younger age group, it's the educational part behind it as well as the why, to understand it, to learn what it's doing, so you can actually help them understand what they're feeling within the body. You certainly do get some of the 21s that you do have to become a bit of a salesman. But you also have to be certainly that educational person to actually help them understand what's going on. It's a lot in terms of generally after each session or before each session. It's the explanation, it's the understanding, it's the reasons why. So the players get it from that standpoint. Certainly when you're coming new into a program, they have to understand, okay, why are we doing this now? You're doing this because this is what's going to affect you. This is how it's going to affect what it's going to affect out on the field. So they're like, oh, okay, I understand that now. Because the young mind has a lot of questions. If he doesn't understand something, you have to explain it for him, and you're that person to do. Educating from there is massive. Certainly why and when they're actually doing exercises. But then if they see you testing it, quite a lot of people know, okay, what was my test results? What did that do? And then like, oh, okay. Then they go ask the mate, oh, what did you get? Oh, I got this. Oh, I got better than that. So if you can educate them, and I'll quite happily take them into a room after them testing results and explain to them what they are, how they affect it, where we need to go to. And then it's up to the performance coaches to actually sit down and say, this is how we're going to do it. So we might have a couple of individual meetings. You guys here need to improve on this. This is what we're going to do. This is how it's going to affect your performance. This is where we're seeing issues, maybe deficits. Yeah, there is a lot. It's almost a bit like a school teacher, but the better they understand it and the better the reason why, there's less grey area and they can actually understand what's going on. As soon as they start to understand what's going on and the reason why, then you want to win it. I remember speaking to a couple of senior players and actually understanding why they're doing certain exercises. As soon as you understand the why, like, oh, okay, that makes sense. And even at that elite level, right at the very top, I think all the way through the chain, you have to be able to explain why you're doing it.
And I think that education process from when I was working within cricket setting, that helps the also for when you don't see these players and maybe they're training outside of your environment, if they have that understanding of why, and then actually how it's maybe progressing to their game, then that and creates easy for yourself in terms of getting these players to train outside of your environment to further their progression as well.
Yeah, sure. And it's massive. You get the coaches involved in as well. They understand more because I think it's a two-way path. It's nice to understand what the coaches are trying to do and you work with them to actually provide that. And it's a two-way kind of chain. They understand what you're trying to do and how you're trying to affect it. And then the questions come towards the players because once they start to understand where player X, Y, or Z is, oh, okay, so he's got a couple of deficits, for example, let's say glutes, hamstrings. They can then have the conversation as well. Once the players start to see a coach taking note on where they might have issues, they start to, oh, okay, I need to work on that because now he knows that this is my problem. And it just starts to, there's less grey areas for the players to sit in. And they actually like, okay, everyone here is actually on to help me. And they see that and then they start to work towards it. It seems to work really, really well.
So obviously the physical side is a big component of the young players' development, but also there's their technical, tactical, there's also psychological, nutrition, and they also do maybe school or other sports as well. So there's lots of stuff going on for these young players. So how do you balance in terms of getting the biggest bang for buck in terms of the physical aspect and balancing that with the other areas to making sure you, with time being a big barrier, especially with working with these players?
Yeah, I think that was one of the biggest eye openers we coming back into the academy setting was understanding the other folks to the wheel as such. You seem to forget that there's education, psychology, so factoring everything in. And when you actually take a step back and see what the athletes have to deal with, there's so much going on and there's so many different cogs to it. How do you get a balance for it? the communication aspect is massive between every department. And the more communication you have, the easier it becomes to put them in. Each department needs to hit certain elements within their structure, and it can easily be put in as long as it's coordinated and communicated across. It's easily done as such. You're respectful for each department for what they are, and for us, it's very simple from a physical point of view. They know when we need to get single or double days in. They know when we need to obviously do gym, even if it goes into being a triple day because you've done that. But the little bit of rest and slotting the other workshops in, for example, psychology after lunch, it gives the rest and recovery as well between it. So you can actually, they end up being long days. They're academy athletes. Unfortunately, they have to do these longer days as such, but it helps them from our side of it. Yeah, if we slot psychological workshop into that longer day, it prolongs the rest and recovery before the next session, so on and so forth. So as long as, look, for me at the moment, it is massively coordinating and ensuring every aspect of the program is put in place properly. But I think I'm very good at organisation, and it's something that I've learned over my career. And if you can get that aspect of it, then slotting the cogs in, it becomes a very easy process to do. And when you can put them in thinking we need a little bit of extra rest and recovery, okay, nutrition can go into that for a little workshop or psychology counseling, then you do need rest. So you're working together to get that balance, and it worked for it really well.
Yeah, and when everyone in that MDT has got the athlete center approach in that mind in terms of how that athlete can be best developed, rather than people fighting for time, and everyone being on the same page in terms of that MDT is a key
Yeah.
for performance, and especially for a program that you're just setting up now.
Yeah, 100%, 100%. There's no egos between the coaching team, between the whole staff that we have here. It's not, this is the most important bit. I must get this bit done. It's as long as you're open and others just say, right, okay, I think we need to go through this. This is what we're looking for. And it's the same across each department. Like, everyone is very open and honest and say, okay, can we get this in? Yeah, no problem. And it's about working together. And that's probably one of the best things here at the moment is, look, the MBT is great and they're very open, and there's no ego into, look, we need to do this more or that more. It works together. And as long as you've got that, you can then get a good performance plan in place.
So I just want to go actually into the aspects of your programming and actual your philosophy in terms of developing a youth athlete. And you mentioned around nailing the basics is really important, and especially from a strength point of view, how that is a big aspect of your program. So just want to explain, why is strength important for a young footballer in terms of their development?
It's the foundation of everything, pretty much. It's the foundation of everything. For them to be able to move really well, to produce force, to be powerful, to accelerate, to decelerate, to jump, to sprint, comes down to having a good foundation of strength. Okay, look, to me, it's massive. And wherever we look, the kids, they have to be strong. They have to move really well. In my eyes, they have to be strong. They have to be robust. But they ultimately have to be relatively strong for their body mass. So there's a lot of people, and through doing my research, there's a lot of programs out there that say that we're doing strength, we're getting kids strong, but ultimately we are not getting kids relatively strong for their body mass. And throughout the research that I've created, it's relative strength is the one that's going to affect performance the most. So if we're not affecting relative strength, then we're missing out on a trick, and they're the ones that are going to actually affect performance the most. Yeah, to me, it's huge, and it plays a massive part of the foundation of what we do.
So so you mentioned how a lot of people are missing the aspect of relative strength. So how can I maybe start to factor that into my coaching and into my programming?
Obviously, if you are getting relatively strong, we need to be able to test it as well. So we're lucky enough for you you can do that through force legs, mid-thigh pull, isometric belt squat. We can look at hamstring testing on the no board. So each test that we've got has an effect on the outcome on the field. Distance covered, sprint distance, high speed running, explosive distance. Once we understand from there, but as the athletes develop, then we start to mature. Obviously, relative strength, we have to look at putting in the right program from there. So it's okay saying we're just going to lift weights to get strong. Okay, But if the foundation of movement is not there, then we're probably going to be loading a dodgy foundation. And that's not right in my eyes. So right from the younger aspect of it, we'll challenge through body weight. We'll look at different movements, ensure that they can master lifting themselves through a pull-up, through a push-up, through a bodyweight squat, through a single leg squat, and challenge each movement as well. So on a box, off a box, ensuring that they can actually do that. As they start to go through their age groups, we'll then start to load medicine balls, dumbbells, squat technique, RDL, etc. As it goes from there, I would like to say that now the biggest thing that my program is, you do the basics really well, all the way through, even though it's the first thing. The biggest things that I look at within my program: squat, RDL, hip thrust. The main three exercises, staple exercises that will be in there. The assistance exercise is the one that changes. Change it either for athletic performance. There are main three strength exercises. So then it depends. Do I want to look at injury prevention? Is there a really sharp turnaround? So I'll then look at low level strength exercises to maintain. So I might go single leg for a dumbbell Bulgarian into single leg hip thrust off a bench. Or is it the point where we can actually do strength power? So then it becomes more of, do we look at barbell squat jumps? Do we look at banded work? Do we look at plyometric exercises? So that's right at the very top, but ultimately all the way down, the key is for those younger players to build the foundation of squat is the ultimate at the very top. They need to learn how to squat, but then we'll challenge it. So is it body weight? Is it assisted? What can they do? What can't they do? And it's just key for us as we go through. I said previously, we'll have a testing point. So as soon as I start to get to the 15s, 16s, 18s, 21s, we'll start to test them. We'll start to look at relative strength in terms of from off the forward legs. We'll start to look at relative hamstring strength as well. And we'll ensure that as they are starting to progress and go through them develop through the maturation process, that it is the relative strength is improving as they start to go through that as well. And we can challenge it. And so as long as we know that little Johnny's improving his relative strength in the key areas, then we know that's going to be our adductors, abductors, hamstrings, full progression through double single leg. So we looked to ensure that's going on through each stage, and then we can start to change that. We know that if we start to improve that, then ultimately we'll start to affect performance.
So why is so you mentioned the squat, RDL, and the hip thrust are your big three movements there. So a lot of quad, hamstring, glute-based exercise and compound movements. So why are these your big three that you'll probably have in most programs going forward?
The way that I look at it is, look, we need to produce force through double leg, single leg. I will change it, but the main three staple ones should go through there. How are we going to do that? Squat. The obvious one from next. It's probably not the most prettiest for Instagram in terms of the section itself, but it's basically works. It's effective. How we then shift it through different stages and how we actually load it and move it is the key to that. So then we'll use our gym aware to actually take a look at with the heavily loaded bar, how fast can we shift it? What's the attempt on it? And then look at hip hinge. Again, key movement. So hip hinge. We're looking from there from RDL. We're looking at there from hip thrust. So if we went forwards to put some forward to actually shift some weight from the hip thrust, we'll do that from floating, from bench. We'll change it up. We'll mix it up how we do that. For me, they're the easiest three for us to go through. Then the assistance exercises will change our program from there. But in terms of how we do it, whether it's a heavily loaded day or a lighter day, so how we then change through our force velocity curve, depending on the day where it is, further away or close to the game, the same movements will occur. And that's pretty much why there's the staple exercises from there. The very basic exercises and such, but the most effective in terms of athletic development. And then how you then change the program depending on where you are throughout the week. Your athlete that you're working with, obviously, if we need to change it, depending on where they are, we'll progress or regress it.
And we mentioned how time is a barrier and there's a lot of stuff going on. So how many sessions per week are you probably aiming for to maximize the strength development? Is it 2-3 times a week, or do you microdose it over the week?
And we'll look at doing 2 sessions throughout the week. Our main lifts are Tuesday, Thursday, if possible. If we have to, depending on the 21 program, we may go more concentric, eccentric, depending on the days if it's back to back. But if predominantly the one that I would favour is 2 sessions a week, we'll look at a strength, 2 strength power, or we'll look at 1 strength, 1 power, depending on where our athletes are on their development. What we'll also do is microdose some work into prehab. Obviously, when we are coming into the program, we need to get enough at this at senior level as well. If we need to affect the program pretty quick, then we've done quite a lot of microdoses within prehab as well, hitting mobility, hitting nutrition lines, hitting a little bit of plyometric work. So a little microdose throughout the week can just change the exercise depending on the days. And that's how we've had to try and affect it. So, for example, the 21 program have come in October, beginning of November. I think what I need to affect that as quickly as possible, because ultimately they are usually decisions around January, February time. So how can we affect our program pretty quickly so they can actually get some effect to the program? Then you've got longer with the 18s, you've got a year to 2 years with them. So for me, it's a mixture of both. We've got our set days where we say, look, we're looking for 2 sessions main lifting per week. Then got some individual pre-am elements, which they'll go off and do, which derives from the testing. And then we've also got our little microdoses for our pre-am.
I was thinking that some coaches and maybe some football coaches or sports coaches who might be listening that might not have access to a gym and all the weights and equipment that you might have in an elite environment. Is there a way of still developing strength? Maybe that's on the pitch or in a sports or something that you can still get good outcomes in terms of those youth athletes to develop this strength and movement.
Yeah, I think I've been quite lucky over the years to have gym facilities all Bexley and Borough to actually get some gym facilities there. I meant some sort of load that I've been able to do. You have to work with what you've got. Now you can still look at, if you haven't got anything, you can always train your body weight. There's plenty of ways that you can do that, either plyometrically or isometrically as well. It's manipulating through using bands is a way that you can look at doing certainly some work. But look, single leg control work you can do without anything. You can go into a sports hall, hold your partner's hand, and actually look at movement control through a single leg. Still going to develop some good movement and some good actual strength and stability in single leg. You can look at body weight control. You can look at jumps, sticks. You can challenge through different movements proprioceptively without a lot of equipment, handstands, etc., cartwheels, all the fun stuff that I've done with youngsters as well through programs. You can challenge the body in a lot of ways. So if you don't have a lot, you can actually still do some. Ultimately, as we get on, we need to challenge and we need to lift a little bit. So we do have to get in the gym to a certain extent, in my eyes, as they develop. If you want to look at increasing that force production, we have to lift at some point.
And those initial sessions there sometimes allows you as a coach to try and develop as a coach and being creative and adapt. And also those sessions can sometimes be the most fun in terms of doing game-based sessions in terms of, like you mentioned, handstands or animal movements or some sort of balance work or partner work. So those sessions can be good fun for those younger age groups in terms of getting buy-in, but on them not even realizing they're actually doing maybe some strength-based exercises.
Yeah, but you said fun for the younger age groups. So fun for the coach. I used to love doing that. Like when I was in the academy at Forest, we would stay for the younger age group. So you'd have the 11s, 12s, 13s coming in and just kept doing some fun games. So they'd come in, we'd have push-up challenges, lunges, we'd do hops, we'd do jumps, we'd do rolls. It was fun because you had to think outside the box. She was taken away from that beauty of people lifting and actually looking on, putting the cherries on top of where they are as an athlete, to actually taking you right back to the beginning and just seeing a wide-eyed child there looking for some fun and actually coming up with them games, little games of TIG and whatnot in a gym where you're not necessarily going to do anything. They're literally catching balls, standing on one leg and whatnot. It's fun for me. I used to love them. fun for me as a coach as well. Challenging yourself, but you get 11, 12-year-olds coming in, they're absolutely buzzing and bouncing around the room. It is fun and it takes you away from what is considered the norm as you get working with senior athletes to where you've got a child in front of you and it's okay, look, I just want to have fun. And it's a really good place to be. I love that.
And sometimes the kids normally best can be better than you at some of the movements or the games that you do.
Without a doubt. You forget how stiff you've got as you get older.
So just to wrap up on about strength, you mentioned some of the benefits of the on-pitch performance in terms of acceleration, deceleration, the power element as well. So how do you work with the technical coach in terms of working with that overall player's development in terms of what the coaches ask them to do on the pitch, or maybe working on the pitch to then help you with your actual programming to develop maybe the physical component that they might be lacking in terms of the transfers to their technical side?
Yeah, it's for me, ultimately, what we do has to affect on field. That was the whole point. Some of the thing, like I said, within my PhD, with whatever we do from a testing point, how does that relate to field? How does field then relate to gym? Whatever we affect in gym, does that affect on field performance? That was one of my final studies that I've put through, and ultimately, that's what we found. If you can affect the test relate to the components that we look through from a GPS unit. What we found within gym affecting relative strength affected the outcome on field. So it links. So it's a nice big circle, which for me as a performance coach is brilliant. And for me as a PhD student, it was excellent because I was like, oh, good. What I'm trying to look at is being affected. So that's great. When you're looking and trying to relate that to the field and to the coach, it's you're analyzing the athlete to say, obviously within the academy, you can look at their acceleration over a certain time, a certain distance, look at the linear speed over certain distances. You can look at acceleration. So if the coach is turning around and saying, hang on a second, he's not very good. If you give him 5 yards of space, he's as a centre half, he's not catching the centre forward. So if we can relate and say, okay, we're actually seeing that over 5 meters, he's actually down. We're looking at his rate of loss development. How does that look? What does that look like? What variables are used to look at that? Does that then affect on field? What's the reactive strength like? What's his stretch hardness cycle look like? What does it look like? And actually utilizing some of the testing there and the variables as opposed to just looking at jump height, as opposed to looking at the basics for it. Can you look a little bit further into the data you've got and then actually put that into practice? When a coach does actually say, actually, over 3 to 5 meters, he ain't very good. Okay, we can see that as he produces force, it takes him a long time to do. His contact dynamics are very good. His stretch cycle is back poor. We can put answers to these questions and actually say, look, this is what we probably need to work on. Then you start to put your knowledge into your programming. Can you actually utilize using a gym where can you focus on accelerative strength? Can we look at explosive strength? Can we look at certain ways of developing his power, his strength, his explosive strength to then affect that sprint? Yeah, it does play a massive part. And that's why I like linking in with the coaches now to see, okay, what's they look at, and they're very good. Their coach's eye is very good. They'll turn around and give you something, but they'll actually see something and we'll actually turn around and try and quantify it. They'll objectively go, oh, okay. It looks like he ain't very good as he turns off his left foot here. What's going on? Can we actually put something down on paper and actually quantify it and say, actually, his left leg is weaker than his right? I don't know. We can look at things and actually try to put something in place to assist it, to actually develop that. You've got more time to do that at an academy level, to actually look deeper into your athlete, to try and actually reduce these deficits. And then hopefully you're saying improving this should affect this and go from there.
And that's quite a good point to finish on in terms of the value as a team, working as a team there. Like I've always said to coaches or young practitioners is lean on the technical coach that you're working with maybe, because sometimes they're the experts really in terms of the sport and what they're seeing. And then you can maybe try and support them in terms of that, because you've seen somewhere on social media that maybe sports science or it's maybe taken over in some areas of sport or some sports in terms of decision making. But so it's that balance of working as a team to get get the outcome in terms of using the data that you are collecting, but also what the coaches may be seeing on the pitch as well.
Again, well, 100%, 100%. And ultimately, as I've grown and developed through my career, you've got to ask them questions in terms of what do you want from an athlete? How do you want them? What do you want from an athlete? So it's not us to go and say, I want to build them like this. This is how I think that they should be built. Well, actually, what does your coach want? And what's he for you? You can see and see something that, not. So ultimately, he's the guy in charge. So listening to and understanding to them, and then you can actually put the pieces to it and try and actually help and actually show, okay, we might be able to do this. I'll take a look and we can actually see if there's anything that we can do to affect it, and then go from there. And then you build a bit more rapport, and obviously that's how it goes, that relationship with them.
So, Brent, thank you very much for your time today. I appreciate it. You've had a long day at work probably, so appreciate you coming and jumping on and having the chat. So if anyone's got any questions that I want to chat about, anything further that you mentioned here today, or any of some of the stuff you're doing or some of your experience that you've had, is there any way people can get in touch with you?
Yeah, you can catch me on Twitter, D82, and you can look me up on LinkedIn as well, Brent Dickinson, and you'll find me on there.
Lovely. And appreciate your time, Brent. Thank you very much. And have
a good rest of the day. Thank you. Thank you. I really enjoyed it. Thanks for having me on.
Thank you so much for tuning into this episode of the Athletic Skills Podcast. I hope you enjoyed our discussion and found it helpful in learning more about impacting your youth athletes' movement and physical development. If you did enjoy this episode, please take a moment to give us a subscribe and share to any other coaches or teachers that you think it may help. Also, if you have any feedback or topics that you'd like us to cover in future episodes, please feel free to reach out to us on social media or on the email in the description, and we'll be more than happy to try and tackle those challenges you are facing as a sports coach or PE teacher. Thank you very much, guys, for listening. I look forward to speaking to you soon.